Hey, it's Randy, back with another video after yesterday's storm system went through the Midwest. Wow, does this change everything or what? Especially for the guys who got a ton of snow. So hopefully you hunt near the area in which you live so that you know how much snow you got on your hunting property. There's a lot of guys out there, they don't live near their hunting property and have no idea how much snow they got. And I think some guys are going to be surprised when they show up at their hunting property this weekend because, wow, some areas just got buried with snow. And then the downside of that is this is going to change everything as far as what deer behavior normally is like in the second week of November with this rut, right? Because these bucks are chasing and deer are still in their typical bedding locations and that type of thing. But man, with this snow, this is going to alter where they bed. This is going to alter where they feed. This is going to alter when they get up and feed. You know, these deer are going to be going into survival mode here. You're talking heavy snow. You're talking really, really cold temperatures. So, you know, these deer are going to be moving in a thermal cover, which is, you know, cedars and conifers, that type of thing. And they're going to abandon some of their typical bedding areas that they use at this time of year. And so also what's going to happen is, you know, guys who have some food plots, maybe they've got some clover or some rye that, you know, has been browsed down. If they got a foot of snow on top of that stuff, you know, these deer are probably going to move somewhere else to get some food. So hopefully that's not going to be bait piles. I know here in Michigan, you know, a bait has been outlawed. But I think with this heavy snow in some areas, I think it's going to prompt some guys to just say, throw up their hands and say, you know what, I'm just going to go out and get some bait anyway. And I think, you know, the snow is going to result in a lot more bait piles out there just because, you know, guys aren't going to know what to do since their food plots are buried under, you know, 2-3 feet of snow. It's pretty ridiculous in some areas. So if you're wondering how much snow you got in your area, this map right here might be some help to you. So I'm going to put the link to this website underneath this video. So you can check out the link under the video and it'll take you to this map here. And it's an interactive map. You know, you can zoom in, zoom out, just like Google Maps. And it's got this snowfall legend right here, which is pretty cool. And it's really accurate because I'm getting reports from clients around the Midwest with how much they got on their property. And it coincides right with the colors of the snowfall legend here on the top right corner. So very interesting. So I'll have that link underneath this video. So feel free to check it out. And then you can, you know, put in your area and see how much snowfall you got on your hunting property if you don't live there. So I'll show you some pictures that I've been getting via text from some of my clients around the Midwest, but just a couple in particular. It's kind of ironic in that, you know, we've got this brown color, which is up to 3 feet of snow, 36 inches. Well, the only dark brown color that is on this map that I can find was right up here in Empire, Michigan, which is where the Sleeping Bear Dunes is, right along the lakeshore in Leelanau County. And so I've got a client up there, and and sure enough, if you go to the chart, which is on the right side of that map, this is the chart you'll see on the right side of that page when you go to that link. Anyway, what city came in number one with the most amount of snow? Empire, Michigan, right where my client is. And at that point, he had 30 inches of snow. Now, the funny thing is, I've got another client that's in right outside of Beulah, Michigan, and he was at 24 inches of snow. Matter of fact, he texted me earlier saying that it was up to 18 inches and counting. So, you know, it's really unbelievable what the kind of snow they're getting up there. And you can see that, you know, with that north wind that we had a lot of lake effect going on the south shores of a lot of big bodies of water. So, you know, for instance, right here, you know, around Traverse City area, you know, the Sleeping Bear Dunes, they just got nailed with that lake effect wind coming from the north. Same thing here on the south shore of the upper peninsula of Michigan. But then, you know, it was a stream of heavy snow that was coming right down the shoreline here. Oh, you see this down here in the bottom right corner? I've got Jake texting me. He is, as I'm doing this video, Jake is in his blind and he's texting me updates as to what he's seeing. He's taking pictures and I feel like I'm sitting right next to Jake in his blind because he's giving me play-by-play updates on what he's seeing out in his food plot. So uh, I'll share that with you here in a second, some of the pictures that he's sending me. But sometimes you'll see this little box pop up here in the bottom right corner on my screen capture. So anyway, I'll show you that here in just a little bit. So you'll see here that along the lake shore, we've got some pretty heavy snow. You know, these guys here got about a foot of snow all the way down the lake shore. And then once we get down into this area, down around Allegan County, you know, around Bent Harbor, St. Joe area, you know, man, they got up to, 18, 20 inches of snow down in this area. And then kind of a strange thing over here, you know, in the Flint, Detroit, Ann Arbor area, and where Jake lives, you know, man, they got up to, 10 inches of snow in this area. So pretty heavy around here. And then also here on the south side of Lake Erie and then south side of Lake Ontario around Buffalo. That lake effect has really kicked in. But other than that, most everybody else got, about 6 inches or less. All these blue dots here through the Midwest was 6 inches or less generally. You know, it's great for being able to see deer from a long distance. So, guys that, maybe got 2, 3, 4 inches, that's a great amount of snow cover. You know, it's really not going to affect food plots at all. But, boy, the guys that have, some rye or clover in their food plots that just got buried with snow, man, it's going to be a major change in the deer movement and what they normally see in the second week of November. And because this is going on right during the peak of the rut, if some of this deep snow and real cold deters some of the rutting activity going on here in November, it could translate into a stronger rut coming up here in December, on that second rut. So, something to maybe look out for if you got buried with a bunch of snow and deer go into survival mode, because they're going to be moving into the conifers and cedar thickets just to, get away from the cold, get out of the wind, basically do what they do in January. So if we look at that list of cities that had the most snowfall, most of them are in Michigan here. But then, we get down into this area here where we've got Guile, Wisconsin, 13 inches, Goshen, Indiana, 13 inches, Duane Center, New York, 12 inches. I believe that's around the Buffalo area. So, you can scroll through this list here, which is also on that same map with that link that I'm going to give you. But I think you can do a search for your city if you put it into the search box there, and it'll pop it up and tell you how many inches, any main city in your area there, how much snow they received. So for myself, I really didn't think that we were going to get that much snow on Monday morning. So I decided to go out and, I thought it would be pretty cool to be out there in the snow, be able to see deer coming and be able to just, have better visibility with a little bit of white dusting on the ground, right? Well, we got a little bit more than a white dusting. In my neck of the woods, we got about 5 to 6 inches. And as I was in the tree Monday morning, it just kept coming down and coming down. And, I got pretty covered with snow. I only saw 4 does early. I had 9 hens walk underneath me, which doesn't happen very often, but I attribute the fact that they didn't see me to the fact that I was completely covered with snow, and I probably looked more like the tree than a person up there in the tree. But it was kind of cool just being out there, in his creation, and just seeing things that you just normally don't see when you're out in the woods like that. It's just kind of a tranquil, peaceful time to be out in a tree. And really, I wasn't cold at all. The only thing that really got cold was my phone fingers, because I'm, working video cameras and I'm, texting people and that type of thing. So, other than that, it was pretty comfortable up there. Then when I got down, I got back to my office about 11 o'clock in the morning, and I got a phone call from my wife who said she was in an accident. She had slid off the road. And she rolled her Jeep, and she's absolutely fine. She just got shook up a little bit emotionally, right? But no, she's fine. Not a scratch on her. Thank goodness for airbags. Anyway, she landed on the wheels, and she called me, and so I called 911, and the cop showed up with a wrecker and got that all taken care of. But the cop said that it was probably one of the worst snow days he has seen in a while, probably because it was one of the very first snowfalls in the area, and people just weren't prepared for it. And it was a really slippery snow event. The the wet, heavy snow, then it froze onto the pavement. And boy, I think it seemed to have caught the snowplow crews off guard as well, because there was a lot of streets that didn't get plowed until much later in the day. So anyway, I'm just thankful that my wife is okay. She's fine, and but now we're short one vehicle, so it kind of puts a crimp in our transportation, right? And so I was planning on being out in the woods today, with this post cold front, right? I mean, I was talking in the earlier video about Tuesday, Wednesday just being absolute great days to be out there. And you'll see from pictures that Jake is sending me right currently live as I'm doing this video that he's seeing a lot of good action here right midday. So I thought I'd just share some pictures I got texted to me from some of my clients around the Midwest. And here's Tom from Empire, Michigan, that I was pointing out earlier. Empire up there by Sleeping Bear Dunes. Here's his measuring stick, 33 inches of snow in 24 hours. And so he's talking about how 2 miles east of the property that I was on, this might change his rifle season. Yeah, you think? I mean, oh my word. He planted some rye out here. This was earlier in the spring or earlier in the summer, but since then he had planted some rye and some oats and whatnot. And but man, when it's under 33 inches of snow, no, I don't think the deer are going to bother trying to paw through that, right? So they're going to be on some other food source somewhere. And the only good thing Tom has, though, is he's got a lot of conifers on his property. And I told him, they might be bedded in there depending on how close, there's another food source nearby. So he's going to have to figure that one out. But that's going to totally change his hunting style for the second week of November, compared to most years. Then I got another client along the lake shore down around Allegan County, kind of below Holland, Michigan. And he sent me a text with a picture of a friend of his that sent him a picture of what's going on in the back of his house. And so you can see he's got looks like a patio table here, and you can see all the snow on there. But 26 inches of snow in Glen, Michigan, which is down there along the lake shore. Unbelievable for mid-November. And then I got a text from another client, Joe, and so he's near the Beulah, Michigan area, which is just a little south, maybe half hour south of Sleeping Bear Dunes. And so he sent me a text yesterday and said that his uncle, which lives next door to his hunting property, has about 18 inches of snow on the property, and it's still coming down. Do you have any tips for hunting deep snow like that? Joe says he's going to be up there for the opener, the gun opener on Friday, and he's wondering if the deer will dig down to his winter rye, or is he just screwed for that much snow? I feel so sorry for some of these guys, I mean, it's a total game changer, when you get that much snow. There's really not much you can do about it, and so you can see here the date. He sent that yesterday to me at about 4:00 in the afternoon. So, Joe's got some conifers on his property up in the northwest corner, and so I replied to him and says, hey, you may have some deer bedded in those conifers there, and it's really good thermal cover in there. But again, it's going to depend on what kind of food sources they have nearby, and if there isn't any easy available high quality food sources right there, well, those deer may go find thermal cover somewhere else. So thank goodness, though, Joe had done a lot of hinge cutting over this year in 2019, and so he's got a lot more woody browse on his property than he normally would have had. So thank goodness for that. He does have a lot of regrowth in his hinge cuts as well. But if he's got 20-some inches over top of his rye food plots, boy, I'm not sure they're going to dig through that to get to that rye. He's going to have to probably wait for the sun in any type of warm days to start melting that snow down a little bit. So I just feel bad for some of my clients who have worked so hard, and putting in food plots, and only to have this happen. Over 2 feet of snow on top of your plots at second week in November. That's just plain unheard of. So then here's these texts that I'm getting from Jake as I'm doing this video. So it's about midday here, and I keep getting these images sent to me from Jake, and Jake is currently, right now as I speak, he is sitting in his Banks blind over top of his little destination food plot, and he says, this is my view for this afternoon. Lots of tracks in the plot. So he just gets up into his blind, and he opens a window, takes some really nice pictures, and just all kinds of tracks. So Jake got 10 inches of snow on his property. So this was all brassicas. These weeds over here that you can see sticking up out of the ground, those are some lamb's quarter weeds that came up after he planted in July. So, just a quick illustration, even though, Jake is a pro at planting food plots and he's got all the equipment, he still has weeds coming up in his plot as well. But you know what? Not a big deal. Not a big deal at all. There's a lot of brassicas underneath all this snow. You're looking at 9 to 10 inches of snow. It may not look like it, but there's 10 inches of snow on the ground here. So his brassicas are buried, The good thing about brassicas, though, it's worth it to the deer to dig through, get a mouthful of brassicas, than, trying to go through 3 feet of snow and trying to get some nibbles of some rye and clover, right? So deer get rewarded with a lot of food with these brassicas just for digging through, 10 inches of snow. So, Jake expects to have a lot of action in his plot. So this is just another view. So I placed that picture on the right with one that he took earlier this year, and I think this picture here in the green was taken in October. You can see some deer out here, and you can see all the brassicas out here, and you can see the brown lamb's quarters out here. The same thing right here, that's sticking up through the snow. So yep, there's weeds in the plot. No big deal. Still a lot of food. Jake doesn't fret over having a few weeds in his plot. Not a big deal. And you can see he sent me that picture at 11:39 this morning. So then about an hour later, I get another update from Jake out of his Banks blind, and he says the deer are starting to move. So they're starting to file into his food plot. And, the picture doesn't look as crisp here because he's took this picture through a closed window, right? You can see here the window's open, nice and clear. Right here it's kind of foggy because the windows are closed. So 12:30, yep, deer starting to move. And he says it's right on time for the moon underfoot major. And Jake pays a lot of attention to the moon position. Not necessarily so much the moon phase, but the moon position. And an underfoot major is proven to be a pretty accurate predictor of deer movement. And again, today is no exception. And then about 10 minutes later, Jake sends me another pic. He says a shooter just came into the food plot. And so, it's kind of cool. I feel like I'm sitting right next to Jake in his blind as he's sending me these updates. It's kind of funny. And he sent me a couple of videos as well, but, video via text doesn't come in very clear. It's pretty blurry because of the, the compression of the file size. So, but anyway, Jake's got a shooter out there. And that was about a half hour ago from what I'm doing right now. And then about 11 o'clock this morning, I get a pic from Bill in Cedar Springs. And this is taken from his covert cell cam. So you can see here the bucks are moving on his property. Bill got about 5 to 6 inches of snow in his neck of the woods. So, nothing that's really going to alter, the rut. It's not really going to alter the deer movement or where they bed, really. 5, 6 inches is not that big a deal. It's not a game changer. That's a lot better than having 2 feet, 3 feet of snow like, Tom and Joe did up in Beulah and Empire. But, just another example. Here it is. I talk about being out in the woods from 9 o'clock till 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, at this time of year. And sure enough, right dead nut center, it's, 11 o'clock in the morning, and Bill's texting me pictures of bucks that he's getting on his trail cams moving around during daylight hours. So here's the last text that Jake just sent me, and I'm just going to insert it real quick here into this video. But you can see here that for today, November 12, on Tuesday, the major feeding period is 11:34 a.m. to 1:34 p.m. So Jake just sent me this text saying that this underfoot moon feeding time showing the last 1.5 hour of good movements was dead on today. He said the last big doe just left the field, and that was at 1:40 p.m., and the feeding index indicator shows that it should have lasted till about 1:34. That's only 6 minutes off, guys. So Jake and I down the road, we are going to do a webinar about these moon majors and moon position feeding times for deer. Not so much moon phase. I think a lot of guys get caught up in moon phase, but Jake and I are all about the moon position and these feeding times overhead and underfoot. So stay tuned for that down the road at some point. We're going to do a webinar about that, but doggone it, this is just way too accurate to not implement this and pay attention to these moon times, right? I mean, Jake is out there seeing it with his own eyes, and he's, basically I've got all his texts and pictures. I got them saved into the computer, and we're going to use these to do a complete webinar on this, because this is not the only time this has happened. This happens just way too often to not take advantage of it. So if you're one of those guys where your food plots just completely got buried with snow, what do? This right here, we got some rye coming through the snow. This is not real deep. This is not a game changer. If this is all you got and you still got food visible, don't worry about it. You're going to be fine. This is just another November day, according to these deer. And if you're fortunate to have the kind of ground where you can grow some brassicas, then, you're going to be able to throw enough food to these deer that's going to last them well into winter. That's why John Comp and I are always talking about trying to do that 3-strip system, right? You got a strip of brassicas, you got a strip of grains, and you got a strip of clover. And, but if your soil isn't up to par and you can't grow brassicas yet, well, then just, first concentrate on the grains, build that soil up. And then once you get to that point where you've got enough organic matter and nutrients in the soil, and do that by going no-till, well, then you can start planting some brassicas and really throwing food at the deer so that you can maybe combat some of these situations if you get too much snow in early November. Now, some of you guys that have soybeans on your property, or maybe your property is right adjacent to a farm that has soybeans still standing, well, consider yourself very fortunate, because, this is when the deer are going to transition over to standing soybeans. You'll be in great shape, for knowing where these deer are going to come out at the end of the day. So, being that these deer are going to be in basically survival mode in these areas of deep snow and real cold, you can bet that they're going to probably lay on their bellies as long as they can, and just to conserve energy, and then come out toward the end of the day into these standing soybean fields and standing cornfields. Whether it's, picked corn or standing corn, picked soybeans or standing soybeans, there's going to be a lot of food left on the table. So obviously the depth of the snow is going to make a difference. So you're just going to have to use your judgment on that. Is there enough easy food available for the deer to get to motivate them to hang around here? And if not, then be prepared for those deer to probably move off to some other areas where there is more available food easily, in areas of deep snow. And hopefully that's not going to be bait piles on your neighbor's property, right? Because, like I said, I think this kind of snow event is really going to motivate some guys to just throw up their hands and say, you know what, my food plots are buried. I'm going out and getting a couple bags of sugar beets or a pickup load of carrots or something like that, right? So anyway, that's one of the downsides of guys that throw bait out where they're not supposed to, which makes our food plot plantings all the more important, right? Now, as far as bedding goes, I just wanted to go back here to this picture on Jake's property. You can see off here in the distance, Jake has got a bunch of conifers out here. He's got some white pine. He's got some ponderosa pine on his property. And you can bet your bottom dollar that last night, tonight, and probably, as long as it's cold and there's a lot of snow, these deer are going to gravitate to these conifers here. Now, there's conifers behind Jake's blind, and he's got them in several different areas on his property. So think about that where you hunt. If you know that the deer normally are going to bed in certain areas in the early part of November and during the rut, if you're suffering with really cold and deep snow, be prepared for those deer to move into those conifers. If you can get between a good food source and conifers, that might be a real good opportunity for you, especially late in the day when they get up out of bedding and they move to a known food source. So just wanted to throw that out there just to make you aware that that's a situation that may change. And so what I thought I'd just show you here is a video that I took with Jake. And this video was taken 6 years ago. This was back in 2013, January 4, 2013. So actually it's almost 7 years ago. And this was a postseason scouting run that we did on his property. We try and do that almost every year. And, you know, once the hunting season's over, Jake and I will tour his property and we'll walk around and we'll look to see what deer have gravitated to. We'll look to see what deer like, some of the changes that Jake has made on the property. You know, we let the deer tell us what they like and what they don't like. And so this was January 4, 2013, almost 7 years ago. And just want to show you how many beds that we found in Jake's conifers once it got cold and really snowy. And this is something that, you know, you might expect to have happen here this week if you're in one of those areas that got hit with a lot of deep snow and cold.
Deer beds everywhere. And here's these ponderosa pines, and they're bedding in these ponderosas. Exactly. That's right. Exactly the same way. And look at this path coming through.
Unreal.
And there are deer beds everywhere.
Beat down.
Look here, just nothing but deer beds. And the cool thing is, look at the scrape, fresh scrape.
Look at that, right above the branch.
This, not only did he paw it, he urinated in it.
Yep.
Just like, you know, they're still scraping.
January 4.
January 4, still doing their thing. Now we're going to enter the deer zone. Can you show me any individual deer tracks?
No, you can't see any. They're all on top of each other.
So this is where I'm going to put my camera.
Wow.
Look at this. You talk about a transition area. Look at this area. And look at the deer beds all around here. So I'm telling you, there's so many deer here.
Wow.
And look, there's just, it's surrounded in deer beds.
It is.
Now, how many beds have we seen? 50, 60 beds?
At least.
In a half acre?
A half acre, yeah. I would say about 50 to 60.
Yeah, it's just something else. Look how they lay up next to these trees.
Yep.
You
right
know,
underneath.
Again, it's the same thing we try to do. If we have an open canopy woods, we start hinge cutting, we lay these limbs down. There's a reason we do that, because the deer are going to come up next to them and use them. They like to have a little cover. And look how they've got overhead cover right over the tops of their heads. Just exactly what we try to make for them.
Yep.
You know, they're doing, man, look at all these in here. This is just really neat.
In the conifers and the thermal cover.
Jeez, how many there is? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. 18 deer beds right here.
Crazy. You got a lot of food on this property, Jake, but with all these deer though, it ain't gonna last long.
It's not gonna last long. You know, I think the word's out.
Yeah.
They talked to all the other, I'm sure a lot of deer from probably a mile have moved into this section now.
Yeah.
And this is where they're going to spend the winter until the food's gone. This little spot right here, and this actually had a really nice scrape here this fall. There was a really good scrape here, and you can see they've just been all over in this, just shredding it. And look at this deer bed right here.
Oh, wow.
That'd be number 19 then. I didn't pick this one up. It's just so typical. Overhead canopy, laying in the sun. It's what you try to make for them. We're going to take a little walk into these willows and see if there's any deer in there. Look at I guess we'll follow the highway in.
Yeah. Don't get lost, Jake. You might not find your way back out again.
Isn't this something? I'm always so thrilled to see this, Randy, because, you know, 10, 15 years ago, this was an open spot in my connection of cover, and it was wet. No matter what I planted, it would die out. I'm like, man, I got to come up with something. And I found these Streamco willows online, did some research on them. They really like this habitat. There's a lot of reed canary grass, which likes wet grass too. And so I put these in here, and boy, they've done really well. We'll just cut around here. So it's kind of open in here, but boy, it's great for arteries to cover, especially during the rut. The bucks will cruise through here, checking out different food sources, but yet they're still in the cover. And they come in, they make their rubs and scrapes in here. I mean, here's a good example of this year's rut activity, you know, coming by and just rubbing on them. And you can see, I mean, they just take to this kind of cover that you produce for them.
And it's a lot easier to navigate through here than it is autumn olives.
Oh yeah, these really they have this very neat clumping nature to them.
They're more vertical than horizontal.
Yeah, it is, you know.
Yeah.
They'll spread out a little more if they're not quite this tight, but this was done on purpose, kind of an experiment. I'm really, you know, I'd like to do this again on different parts of the property. I really like how it come out. And yeah, we just got, I mean, you know, again, it's I would imagine they're staging up in here just before they go to the corn or go into that bean field. Lot of deer activity just through here. Something else, isn't
it? Just unreal.
Come out this way. Yeah, here's the nice big rubs on there.
Yeah.
You know, just all kinds of activity.
Now, we haven't walked very far in the last half hour.
No, we haven't.
But you know what? It seems like your property, we've gone a lot further because we've changed habitat type so many different times.
All these different diverse habitats that I put on here. And we've really been focusing on this 7 acres. It's really, you know, it's sort of my gemstone on my deer management because of all the different diversity, the food sources, and the connected cover, as I call it. Every type of cover, even though it changes in diversity, connects from one to the other. And it just allows these deer to think this 7 acres is like 40 acres. And for a lot of people that walk in here, it feels like it. You know, there's just all kinds of, it'll take us quite a while to make our trip through here.
All right, so hopefully that video was helpful to you. Hopefully it'll help you kind of alter your tactics a little bit if you're going to be hunting in some deep snow and cold this week. And if so, I hope you get on some deer. If you weren't too affected by all this snow and cold and it's just going to be another typical second week of November during the rut, hopefully you'll see a lot of action like you might normally do on a typical November and are able to take a nice buck home. So, hey, I'd love to see the pictures and stories that you guys get in this coming week here, and even maybe possibly share them with everybody else in a future video too. So, hey, stay safe out there, guys. Good luck this week, and we will see you on the next video.